their life was so terrible, they're just trying to deal with it. So, again, how do we deal with people like that? Chuck them in jail. Yeah. We need to really check that behaviour and check that mindset, because what all these people are seeking is connection and healing. That's all they want. That's all anybody who takes drugs. These people don't want to go out on the street and sell their bodies to put this poison in themselves. They don't want to do that. But they feel like that's all they can do, because they just want to be accepted. They just want to feel loved. They want to feel like a normal human being. And we criminalise that. So when we look at the cause of addiction and we start to try and address people's disconnection from their community and from their family and all the rest of it, then we can start to actually make some inroads into healing instead of taking these poor people and chucking them in jail. There's no healing there at all. So benefits of psilocybin use, I just want to make the point, it's not only for people that are unwell. Certainly the already well can benefit from exposure to these types of substances. But as my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu professor once said, it is for everyone, but it's not for everyone. Okay? If you take it, will you die? No. Will you enjoy it? Depends on the person. Depends on your past. Depends on what type of person you are now. Depends on so many different things. So it's not for everybody, but it can be for everybody. It's not going to hurt you the way that crack cocaine or heroin or alcohol is going to. So in terms of retail models and availability into the future, certainly Mind Medicine Australia is making quite the push to have a very mild rescheduling of psilocybin and MDMA for therapeutic uses. I don't necessarily advocate that approach. I think we just need to focus on educating people. Not about trying to make a little tricky baziki gap in there so people can capitalise and some people can have access to it and some people can't. We've done that too many times in this country for too many different things. So I think that as much as possible, if we're all educated about this stuff, we take responsibility for our health into our own hands, then we don't have to rely on potentially questionable sources. So just to that, standardisation of the dosage, is it possible that the pharmaceuticalisation of these types of plant medicines in the future will seek to make a standardised dose? But as I've already said, if I take a dose the same as Sister here, we're different people. She's not only that, she's a different gender to me. So there's no way we're going to have the same response. There's no way. It might turn out positive for both of us. I might be giggling my head off. She might be in the fetal position screaming for the next 2 hours. Straight up, that's the difference. So trying to put it into the, oh, this pill will do this for you model, I have doubts about that. Certainly, I am all for further availability of these types of substances, but certainly education, as I say, is the key. I just want to leave you with one last thought before I have some questions. This is a report which was done by the think tank Australia 21, and I just want to read the title. This was back in 2012. The title of it was, "The Prohibition of Illicit Drugs is Killing and Criminalising Our Children, and We're All Letting It Happen." That's the title. 2012, Bob Carr, all these pollies, ex-pollies, bloody all these people were a part of this and they came up with it. And one of the last recommendations of this report is this: it is time to stop sloganeering and insist to all of our political representatives and to our media that Australia must have an informed national debate about the alternatives to a policy that has failed disastrously and is criminalising our young. Straight up. So please consider what I've brought to you today. If you are interested in looking at anything more along these lines, certainly this is my website, Responsible Choice. That's my email address, and my book, Psilocybin Mushrooms of Southeast Queensland, Australia, this one here, which contains all of the golden rules, lots of lovely photos in there, history, science, all the rest of it. I even got lovely Professor David Nutt to write a shoutline for me. He said, "I'm pleased to see the principles of evidence-based harm reduction being so prominently endorsed by this timely book." Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. It's been a pleasure to be back down amongst the Mardi Gras crew. Any questions? sister.
Is there a cumulative neurotoxin if you take a lot for a long time?
As far as I understand, there's not, and certainly the evidence that I've been exposed to, the research that I've been exposed to, is that psilocybin actually contributes to what we call neurogenesis, or the growing of new neurons in the brain. Now, Paul Stamets is well aware of this research, and he advocates more for people with degenerative or cognitive disorders. He advocates a stacking regime of microdosing. I'm not advocating it here. I'm just providing you with this information, which he provided everyone with. And he takes a microdose of psilocybin with B6 for the peripheral blood stimulation, especially to the end of the neurons, and lion's mane as well, because it is known to remove amyloid plaque from the brain, which up until recently has been associated with Alzheimer's and things like that, but research that has been undertaken recently shows that there is not this substantial link that we have been led to believe there. But certainly psilocybin has been shown, certainly in a lot of rat studies, that we're big on the rat studies these days. Neurogenesis is certainly a part of the effect of psilocybin in the human and mammalian brain.
Thank you. Lovely answer. You say that for early Alzheimer's you should take some, like you just said, only over weeks or...
Well, there's a couple of people who are pretty notable out there in terms of their professed microdosing regime. One is Paul Stamets, and the other one is James Fadiman, who's been in psychedelic science for a long time. So Fadiman promotes a 1 day on, 2 days off sort of model with microdosing, and Sister, who's up after me, will probably speak more to this. Whereas James Fadiman is sort of 1 day, then 2 days off, 1 day on, 2 days off, and that's because when you take most plant medicines, and certainly most psychedelics, your body induces a very high tolerance straight away. So if I take let's say I take 5 grams of mushrooms tonight, and I want to wake up in the morning and take another 5 grams of mushrooms, that'll do nothing. The second dose will do nothing. My tolerance is raised by my body so high that it won't really matter. So it takes a lot of time before your body lowers that tolerance, and usually it's about 2 or 3 days for most people. So that's why Stamets has sort of framed his regime in the way he has. But Fadiman, sorry, that's Fadiman. Stamets is much more sort of 5 days on, 2 days off. He's much more try and keep that that dosage consistent, but smaller. Yeah.
How do you spell Fadiman?
F-A-D-I-M-A-N, I believe. Cool. More questions. Sister down the front, you've been waiting so patient.
That's all right. My question was just about the difference between the, you're saying don't eat them fresh ever, they should always be dried, and if so, how do you dry them? And,
okay.
And the weight you're talking about is the dry weight, I presume?
Totally true. Now, in terms of standardisation of dose, I would highly advise that the mushrooms are dry. This is usually in a dehydrator. Not at super high heat, because psilocybin is heat sensitive. It will degrade at high heat. But most people will dry their mushrooms, then they will weigh them and see how many grams they're taking. And then oftentimes they'll either put them in a tea, because it's water soluble. Psilocybin is water soluble, so if you steep it as a tea and keep it below boiling, even though some people will boil the living daylights out of their dose and apparently it still works, most people, to avoid the chitin, which is what forms up the actual physical body of the mushroom, it's the same type of substance that you find on like shellfish that makes their shell. It's quite indigestible, so it can lead to a little bit of nausea or tummy stuff. So some people will steep their mushrooms for a certain period of time, and then they'll cast out the mushroom body and they'll just drink the water, and that'll be their dose. But other people will take their mushrooms fresh. We need to remember that these mushrooms are coprophilic, and more often than not you're going to be picking them out of cow poo. So I would advise some sort of sterilisation regime, and this is where that tea process comes in, because you're using water hot enough to fry any nasties that are in there. But some people certainly will ingest fresh mushrooms. However, the only difference is they're much more potent, and certainly all of the cocktail of different chemicals which are within the psilocybin mushroom, so psilocybin, psilocin, aerogenacin, baeocystin, norbaeocystin, the list goes on. They all have discrete effects, and I would say very much like cannabis and the entourage effect. If you have them all together, they have a certain effect. If you have them in isolation, they have a different effect. So the effect from having fresh mushrooms is the effect will come on much quicker, and it's usually much stronger. Because in the drying process, as I say, psilocybin is heat sensitive, you will lose some of the active constituents as you dry it down. Yeah. More questions, please.
So sorry, just to clarify, there's no harm in eating them?
No, absolutely not. No, eating them fine, not eating them fine. Yeah, not going to be an issue. But as I say, for some people, you know, like as I spoke about, yeah, the chitin's really going to upset your tummy. So if we're talking about Kilindi EE dose that I talked about earlier, 40 grams, that's not going to go down too well. And his protocol was you just sit there and you eat it. You eat dry, you just eat 40 dry grams, have a sip of water, just keep eating it. Might throw up some, oh, how much do I reckon that was? Oh, 2 grams, all right, another 2 grams goes in. Yeah, extreme, I would say, I would class that as, but a discipline, and certainly from a martial artist, I wouldn't expect too much more, or less. You look like you got a question, sister. Okay, yes.
If I pick the wrong mushroom and ingest it, what symptoms will I experience, and when will I know to go and seek help?
Okay, that's a really good question. Now, it's going to depend on the mushroom that you eat, and how much of them you eat, of course. Now, with the luckily for us, with the cubensis mushroom and the Paneola cyanescens mushroom, there aren't any, there's not like Gallerina mushrooms that look exactly like them, that you'll find around them, up here. Certainly, if we're talking about Psilocybe subaeruginosa, which are high altitude, low temperature mushrooms that you'll find South Australia, Victoria, and in sort of like the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, they're pine forest mushrooms. They're they don't like the poo, they like the pine and the bark. They grow directly next to Gallerina mushrooms, so the identification of them is essential. We do have a little bit of wriggle room here, but certainly I would expect a sore tummy, cramps. Certain mushrooms will give numb lips and things like that. It's really going to be a case of trying to avoid speculation about whether you've eaten the right mushroom once you start to come up. Let's just say you've picked the right mushroom, but you think it was the wrong one. That's not going to be fun. That's going to be really quite significant. So again, the reason that I have the 4 golden rules in my book is just so that you know if this is something you want to pursue. When you've identified it, you know what it is. You've in your mind, you're set, no, this is what it is, I've found the right one. There's no chance here. So that when the effects start to come on, you're not going to reach for the telephone and call the ambulance straight away. Oh, I think I'm dying. What did you have? Psilocybin mushrooms? Oh yeah, give it an hour. You know, give it 2 hours. Yeah. But certainly I can't give you a clinical kind of breakdown of the symptomology and all the rest of it, because there's so many different mushrooms that you could ingest. And again, we're all unique individuals. I might just get a little bit of an upset tummy, might spend a couple of hours on the loo, you might be fine. You might just shake it off. So yeah, but we're not dealing with Gallerina death cap mushrooms alongside cubensis and Paneola cyanescens. Oftentimes they're just together. And the mushrooms that you find around them, if you follow those golden rules, you're going to steer clear of those anyway, so you should be right.
Will they show signs of blue? All of them show signs of blue when you split the stem?
Absolutely. When we're talking about psilocybin containing mushrooms, yes, they will show blue, but...
Bad variety?
Yes, they should.
I get confused, like when I'm picking like that, I get confused sometimes with different types that do sort of show a little bit, but they go not as purple as my gold top.
Yeah, totally.
And then I get little tiny ones that look like beautiful little strawberries.
Yeah.
Take them, in 5 minutes, you're absolutely fucked.
Yeah, so you're talking more about Liberty caps, Simulanciata. So they're a little bit less common. They certainly are around here.
6 kilo, I'll only get maybe 400 of them.
Yeah, tiny. Yeah, they work, but very strong, like you're saying. Yeah, put you down for sure.
Blue, white, blue.
Yeah, for sure. So we really want to have that indicator of the blueness of the psilocybin oxidizing.
And what about if I slow my deflator rate down to 30 degrees, like 72 hours? Will that be better? Will I get strong mushrooms doing that?
I would say that the slower that they're dried, the less of the degradation of psilocybin you're going to encounter. So I would say that probably will have higher potency if you dry them slower. I'm not advocating it though. Okay. Question? Someone? No? Yes, sir.
You have to worry about organic cow shit.
I don't think you need to worry about it. I mean, oh, sorry, no, I'll rephrase that. I've re-understood your question. Certainly, most cattle, commercial cattle, have quite the dosage of who knows what, for ticks and worms and blah-de-blah-de-blah-blah. So certainly, if you are on good terms with a natural farmer, or you have cattle yourself and you know exactly what's gone into them and what's been put onto them, that would be far preferable than a random roll of the dice of old mate who, you know, is dipping his cattle and all that. No judgment there. I'm just saying, obviously, there's chemicals that are going into the animal's organism, and it's going to eliminate those, and some of those are going to come out in the manure for sure. So, obviously, the cleaner the better. It's the same with cannabis. We want our cannabis as clean as we can possibly have it, with no artificial fertilizers or any sort of chemicals that are aimed at killing or impairing the function of the plant, because of course if we're going to take it into ourselves, that probably isn't the best idea. Yeah.
How easy is it to grow a spore-print solution in a glass of boiled rice?
I would suggest you look that up. That's a complicated question, but what Sister's alluding to is how you actually cultivate mushrooms. Usually it involves the spore print that I said before, creating a liquid culture. The mushroom spores are activated by water. I talked about the significance of water to the mushroom earlier. And certainly they need a substrate to grow in. So a lot of people use a brown rice tech for that. But as I said, it is a pretty steep learning curve. It involves a lot of sterilisation, preparation of substrates, and rice cookers, and temperature heaters and all sorts of craziness. I am by no means an expert on that, but it's all there. As I said, the McKenna brothers, Terence and Dennis, a long time ago published a book on how to cultivate magic mushrooms. It's still around today. It's a simple Google search. You'll find a whole lot of stuff. There is a little bit of use of syringes, like proper medical syringes for injecting spores into substrate and stuff like that. It can get a little bit complicated and fiddly, as I understand, but in this context, certainly what brother up here mentioned about the cow poo, well then you can certainly get around that whole thing. The only thing I will say about cultivated mushrooms is, generally speaking, they're much more potent than wild crafted mushrooms. Why that is, I don't know. But it's probably similar to do a similar case with medical cannabis. If it's grown in a controlled environment and given all of the right environmental conditions, you'll get a certain product. You take that outside and you grow it out in the rain and the sun and the wind and all the rest of it. It's going to change the expression of that organic product. So probably similar there. Yeah.
And Tim, one more question. Would it be a terrible mistake to take a tiny bite of fly agaric?
I wouldn't advise eating fly agaric. What Sister's talking about there is the Amanita muscaria mushroom, or the fairy mushroom, the red mushroom with the white dots on the top that we know and love so much. Don't eat those ones. They are very toxic when you eat them fresh. They need to be processed usually by drying or boiling. And what we're talking about with Amanita muscaria is not psilocybin. We're talking about another chemical which is called muscimol. It has very different effects. It doesn't work on the serotonergic system, but it's certainly classed as plant medicine and used by a Siberian shaman for a long time. But yes, the muscimol is processed by the body differently to psilocybin, and as I understand it, if you eat Amanita muscaria after you've cured it and you've processed it properly, you might want to collect your urine and drink that, because the body processes the muscimol out of the Amanita muscaria and you eliminate it through your urine, but that's actually what you want. That's actually the active component. So if you drink your urine, you'll get a pretty heavy dose of that. Not that I'm advocating that either. It's just that. Yeah, no, definitely not.
Okay. You can have the ibotenic acid.
Okay.
Ibotenic gets converted into coffee.
So very stimulating. So Sister's saying very stimulating effects from the ibotenic acid translating into the muscimol there. But yeah, very different mushroom genus and species that we're talking about. There was one up the back, yes?
Can you touch base on tree lovers paralysis?
Tree lovers paralysis, yes. So what Sister's talking about here is what we've been talking about is coprophilic mushrooms, not tree lovers. We've been talking about poo lovers. Now, what we're alluding to here is more the Psilocybe subaeruginosa, or Psilocybe australiana, if you want to call them that. But these are the cold weather, high altitude mushrooms. Now, they're known as wood lovers because they prefer the decomposing pine needles and pine bark to grow on and colonise. A lot of users report paralysis. I would tend to frame it more in body load, but also in terms of the potency of subaeruginosa. It certainly has the capacity to incapacitate the user. But it's very, very common with subaeruginosa. I understand it's quite common with Paneola cyanescens as well. Certainly that ataxia is the name that we'd probably give that, which is sort of like loss of motor control and paralysis, can certainly be one of the more negative side effects of engaging with psilocybin as a whole, psilocybin mushrooms, because not only can you feel like you're disassociating or exiting your physical body, you can lose motor function. So again, as I said earlier, if you're thinking about exploring these, and especially in higher doses, you really want to think about having a trip sitter, someone there to keep you safe and reassure you that everything's okay, and who can give you the assistance and the assurance that you might need, because it can get pretty hairy when you feel like you can't move. And literally it's not just, oh, I feel like I can't move. You won't be moving. It'll be paralysis, like Sister said. So yeah, it's certainly something to consider with the wood lovers, but even with Paneola cyanescens. I suspect it's probably due to the higher psilocin content, but again, as I said earlier, all magic mushrooms are a cocktail of a variety of different chemicals, and we don't even know, until recently, scientists didn't know what aerogenacin did. It's a chemical within a lot of magic mushrooms. It's actually responsible for the bliss that users feel when they take it. If you have mushrooms high in aerogenacin, you'll get a very blissful experience. If it's quite low in it, you'll get other effects accentuated. Yeah, so it's all a bit of a cocktail there, and there's a lot of unknowns about the mushroom constitution and what the compounds within, apart from psilocin and psilocybin and a couple of others, we're not really sure what they all do.
And by paralysis, it doesn't affect your breathing?
No. It'll be yeah, ataxia, in that you'll feel quite physically, your motor function will be severely impaired or just completely gone. It's only temporary though. It's usually a couple of hours, and you should be in full function again.
Just stay there for a while.
Yes, mate. Go for it.
Just what you said sort of sparked me up to go back to what you were saying about. I think it's psilocin, which has the ability to push consciousness from one part of the brain into another.
True.
So that sort of, and the bit about bliss you said,
yeah,
makes me ask a somewhat controversial thing about, really, are you saying, and all of the people that wrote these books,
sure,
are they saying that these drugs produce these consciousness experiences, or even without drugs?
Yeah, absolutely. So Professor Nutt and his fMRI research, which continues to this day, he works in the Imperial College in London, he and his colleagues did, in their studies, found that the neurological correlates of consciousness, if I can put it that way. So if you put a certain substance into the human brain, and certainly we're talking about psychedelics, so LSD is one of them, ayahuasca most people will be familiar with, that is just, well, not just, but it is strongly DMT, which is what is in mushrooms as well, mescaline amongst others. They'll have the effect of changing the circulation of the blood in the brain, and when we go from a strongly circulating node in the brain to another one, that shifts our consciousness. And certainly the researchers identified what they call the default mode network, which is the main type of our brain that we use most of the time, and our task positive network, which is more the brain, that part of the brain or the consciousness that you access when you go into your meditative practice, or your yoga, or your qigong, or your drumming, or whatever it is that you do, your sound healing. There's various ways to get to the top of the mountain. Psilocybin's only one of them, and all of these other plant medicines are one of them. Can you do it in other ways? Absolutely you can. But in terms of meditation, if I want to be a Theravadan monk and I can switch consciousness at the drop of a hat, well, I might have to study in a monastery for 10,000 hours most of my life before I can cultivate that skill. Or I can take a stiff dose of psilocybin and it's going to do that for me, but it's going to force it. So herein lies the danger. If you're not used to these states of consciousness, and if you're not used to modulating your consciousness, and you take something thinking, oh, this is going to just be like alcohol, or this is just going to be like cannabis. No, it's not. It's going to radically shift your consciousness, and it's going to force it. So if you don't want to, and this is where a lot of people get in trouble, oh, I wish it would end, oh, I don't want to be here, I want it to stop. If you're on the roller coaster, you bought the ticket, you get off when it stops. That's it. So you get, and I guess I'll make this comment too, I'm a firm believer that when you engage with plant medicines, you get what you're supposed to get. Regardless of whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. Oh, it's so awesome, I saw God, great. Oh, it's terrifying, I'll never do that again. Yeah, you got what you were supposed to get. And this is where the pharmaceuticalization of this field gets a little bit murky, because they want us all to have the same experience. You can't, we're all different. And this medicine doesn't work like most medicines. It works on so many different levels. So my opinion is, if you have a bad trip, you're supposed to have a bad trip. Sorry. If you had a good trip, you're supposed to have a good trip. Well done. Congratulations. You know, ideally, if we're going to engage with these types of plant medicines, we start the mushroom or the vine or whatever it is that we're going to engage with, or the plant. The work starts as soon as you consider, oh, this is something I might want to do. That's when the work starts. You start to work on yourself going, okay, what have I got? I might just take a little bit of personal stock here. What's going on inside? Because if I don't, and it's all just jammed in my face at the drop of a hat, that's going to be overwhelming. If I can take some of the responsibility again on myself, on my own healing journey, oh, okay, yeah, that's right, I'm working with this, I've had this grief or this loss or this trauma, ooh, I better just touch back into that a little bit before I stick it in my face and I can't escape it. I might just want to familiarise myself with it and start to do some of the work myself, what I can do myself, and then hopefully the plant medicine will help me do the rest, because at the end of the day, it is your consciousness. You are your healer. These plants can help our body to heal us, but at the end of the day, we heal ourselves. So the more responsibility we can all take for our healing, the better we'll all be. Thank you for listening, everybody. And thank you, sister. I'm slinging books too. If you're interested in what I just said, I've got a whole lot of these books. If you want to buy one, please feel free.